What is going on, everybody? It has been so long since I've made a video on YouTube, and today, I wanted to do a little sort of warm-up video before, before I upload this spicy thing I've been working on for a while. My YouTube kind of just died for like the past month, I think, because of school, but you guys know how it is. But recently, I gave the TOEFL. What is the TOEFL? Well, it's this English proficiency test that you give if you want to study anywhere that teaches classes in English. It's pretty required. And it doesn't just apply to colleges either. It also applies if you want to work abroad or some place that you are planning on working at might require you to have a certain degree of English proficiency. So the TOEFL along with the IELTS is these two tests that are pretty mandatory for you to give. And all right, so the TOEFL is like the super basic one, all right? It's given by ETS, aka the Educational Testing Services, I believe is the correct acronym. And what you people, or at least what my viewers, I'd assume, aren't just completely old men, but mostly young people and teenagers. What you guys got to give along with me is the TOEFL IBT. And the TOEFL IBT is rated on a 120 point scale. And I gave the test and I got 116, which I'd say is a pretty decent score. So obviously I know exactly what I'm talking about. And so for today's video, I want to talk about how you guys should be prepping and giving the TOEFL. Now, keep in mind, right, I am not an educator. I am not some sort of special TOEFL person that works for the ETS, but I am simply just a dude who gave the TOEFL and scored pretty decently on it. And since I'm a young hip person, obviously I should know what to talk about with you guys. So here's what we need to expect for the TOEFL. There are four sections, and the four sections are pretty straightforward. There's a reading section where you read these texts and comprehend what you read to answer some questions. There is the listening section. There is also the speaking section actually, and then finally we have a writing section. And so these four sections generally are pretty good at testing the fundamentals of the language that you are trying to prove you are proficient at, in this case, English. And each of these sections are worth 30 points total. But just because they're worth 30 points does not necessarily mean that, you know, there's always going to be a set structure for each of these sections. I mean, there is to a certain degree, but in reading, for example, you may receive 30 to 40 questions, and take the time to give the test may range from 48 to 72 minutes, I believe. Apologies if I am giving false information. You guys can check up on these nitty-gritty guidelines yourself on the ETS website, which I will be sure to link. And so listening, this one's a way more arbitrary. You may receive 12 to 18 questions or even more actually. I'm not sure how many questions you may receive on the first section of listening. And there's also a second section and yada yada. You guys get the idea. And so, first of all, how do you prep before you give the TOEFL and what should you expect? So, obviously, there are plenty of source material all over the web to help you get an idea for how the TOEFL works. So, even just the ETS website I've found has been incredibly useful in helping me find some TOEFL material. In fact, when I gave the practice tests on this website, some of the questions that I got in the actual test were exactly the same as the practice tests that I had given just a week before. So this is a very practical source of preparation. All right, and this whole thing, it actually doesn't time you the ETS tests. You got to do all the timing yourself, but it gives you a generally good idea of exactly what sort of questions that you should be expecting. Okay, guys, I'm back. Wow, my fucking Photoshop crashed. All right. So, that was bizarre, but the overall. Why can I not write? What the fuck is. All right. So, wow, all sorts of jank. All right. I don't think OBS sits well with Photoshop for some reason. All right. So, um, as I was saying, the ETS website is just absolutely amazing for all of your TOEFL related prep. And the idea is that, you prep as much as you can with the practice tests, and you should have a pretty good idea of what to expect. So, first of all, reading section. Now, from what I've noticed, there will always be 1 to 2 scientific passages. So, shit ranging from like, oh my God, global warming, something, something, or something about like narwhals. I don't know. It could honestly be about anything, but just pretend that what you're going to be receiving is basically just 2 articles written by National Geographic or something of the like. They're not necessarily going to be too difficult. They're going to be on the medium level of difficulty where, for the most part, you could definitely tell that they are nerdy and boring scientific passages, but there is really shouldn't be any difficulties trying to pick out the main ideas and the content from these scientific passages. But most importantly, for the reading section, you need to be reading carefully. Now, I know that sounds lame as hell, right? Oh my god, it's a reading section. All you have to do is just read, right? But you would be shocked at how easy it is to miss certain things. So you gotta be reading carefully and properly digesting what you have just read with your very own pair of eyes. And what I mean is, if a question is asking for like that's all. Let's just drop this. You guys will know it when you prep yourself or when you're giving the actual TOEFL. You need to just be reading carefully. All right, but within the reading section, this isn't all you do. You're not just comprehending the passages. This is where the vocabulary questions come in. And so, the vocabulary in and of itself is not going to be something super simple like, oh my God, what does apple mean? And then the options are like fruit, potato, and basket or something. No, no, no. It's not going to be something as straightforward as that. But it's also not going to be something crazy like type out the exact definition of the word lucrative. Who knows? Like, well, what does lucrative even mean? I just know it's a very, very money, but like, if someone asked me for the exact definition, I would not be able to give it. But the words I got were on the sort of above average level of English comprehension. So I got the word ultimatum and profound, and I received a couple others, but this is what I can remember. And profound just means organic, fresh, new. Ultimatum just means like you know, like a final choice, basically. And you don't need to know the exact definition for words like these, but as long as you have a general idea of what you're reading, and you're also going to be trying to fit these words into the context of the text, so that also means you can sort of infer what these words could exactly mean. Again, I don't think, off the top of my head, before I did the practice test, I knew exactly what profound meant. I just knew it was something pretty groundbreaking-ish, something important, but I did not know that it meant something that was just completely fresh and organic. I had little slightly different definition in mind. So make sure to touch up on your vocabulary, everybody. And to do that, I'd recommend just going to vocabulary.org and doing the SAT prep tests, or even just the random, or even just doing any sort of random quizzes on vocabulary.org. This would be an excellent uh, source for prepping your vocabulary section on the TOEFL. Now, another main thing that you should expect from the TOEFL reading passage is that after reading every single text, right? After reading a text and then going through around 9 questions. There's going to be 10 questions for each text. After going through 9 questions, or however many questions there are related to the text, there's going to be this one summary question. And so this summary question is the tricky part because it is worth 2 points. And so these stand out, and these aren't just multiple choice. So you're always going to be given an option of just 6 choices, all right? And they're going to include some ideas or some parts of the passage that you have just read about. And you're going to need to pick three. And, you may or may not to order it. But the idea is you need to pick three, and then these need to be the exact main ideas of the passage. And most importantly, right, you guys are gonna need to pay attention to this, is that they must not be insignificant or side tangents. So, although all of these are probably, although only one of them are gonna be, only one, maybe two of them might be like a complete freebie where, you can definitely tell that they're like brand new information unrelated to the passage and you can, safely cut those out. But for the most part, you're gonna be left right off the bat with 5 choices. And within these 5, you need to figure out which ones are the imposter and which ones are the main ideas. And that in and of itself should be pretty straightforward, right? You just read the text, and all you need to do is just find the 3 biggest ideas or find the 3 biggest events that consequently happen throughout the text. And so it's going to be super easy. Let's say it was choices 3, 4, and 6. However, all of a sudden, at the beginning of the summary question, it may include something like, this text was about, and then it writes a little bit of text here, sort of describing the passage to a certain degree, and then it might ask, what were the main ideas? And so, when given an option like this, right, if, for example, let's say you pick 3 because it matched the intro section really well and it was like a perfect introduction to the text. However, if the question was pretty explicit about that introduction to the text, then there's a chance that 3 might be the redundant choice, and perhaps it would have been 5, which covered another one of the main body paragraphs that could have been a bit more topical, right? And so, again, this is a tricky section. Just do some prep. And honestly, no matter how much prep you do, you're just going to have to end up going with your big brain during the test on this one because, the summary questions differ for each and every text that you're reading. So, that's the reading section covered. And the next section that you're going to have to deal with is listening. And now, the cool thing about TOEFL is that you can take notes for the listening section. And so, theoretically speaking, in a perfect world, right, if you can write super duper fast, which I can't do, especially on a drawing tablet, if you can write super duper fast and you just like pick out any piece of information that does not seem to be total filler, then for the most part, you're gonna be fine. And that's basically just what I did, guys. I'm not gonna lie, for the listening section, all I did was, sort of note take in a way where I was just gathering every single piece of information that I could, and so I would just be like, oh my god, this guy's talking about bed, and then he said something about motherfucking sheets. Okay, so I write sheets here. He said comfy. All right, write comfy in a little parentheses here. And then within that comfy, he said there are 2 kinds, and they're either provided by material or the type or the size of the comfy sheet, yada yada. And I just I took notes in a super hectic way. And they do provide plenty of paper. You are given incredibly pointy 2 fresh pencils as well that you can also get sharpened at any given moment during the test. And so, you can just blast through this whole thing right here. There's going to be 2 sections within listening. There's going to be 1 to 2, maybe three conversations that you gotta listen to in the first section with maybe one simple lecture thrown in. And for listening, as long as you're taking notes effectively, you should be able to answer most of the questions. And uh, even if you, for example, did not include a piece of info that you considered to not be fill that you considered as filler and did not, write down, but then the question asked for it, you know, like if you just listened well, you should be able to remember because the first section of listening does not require that many brain cells. It's super simple stuff. Everyone's done the listening section before. But the second section of listening is sort of when the difficulty amps up. Okay, everybody, I am back once again. Wow, it seems like my drawing tablet pen has a certain property where if I press the buttons in a certain way, it just bottlenecks my Photoshop, which is powerful. But regardless, second section of listening is when it gets kind of hard because you're going to be listening to 1 to 2 really long lectures. And this part really had me stumped because no way in hell you can write down every single piece of relevant information, right? It's just going to be one guy talking just nonstop for over 2, 3 minutes. And, you know, every single piece of info can seem important. And for the most part, all of it has a chance of popping up. And so I'd say that the best way to do this is not to try and note take everything. Because unless you're like super duper sonic fast, then you're going to need to write it, take your notes in a structured manner where you kind of divide up what he's saying. So let's say part one and part two and then part three, yada yada. Let's say for part one, he covers, I don't know, asphyxiation as a cause of death, and then he talks about falling to death and yada yada. And you kind of just take the main ideas here and you try to sort of memorize everything he's saying. And for these, pay attention to the transitions. You need to pay attention as to exactly how the ideas are moving from one to the next, and the TOEFL questions will ask for that. So you need to pay attention to exactly what is causing the transition within these lectures slash conversations. Is it like a student that propped a question, or did the professor himself just randomly pull out, you know, the idea out of nowhere? Who knows? You need to pay attention to how the ideas are flowing and grasping as much as you can about the ideas just from listening alone. So try to note take here in a structured way, and you should be fine for listening. And then comes the dreaded speaking section. Now, this is just pure aids, right? So I'm just going to divide it up here. Your first question is going to be super straightforward. It's just going to ask for your opinion on something. Let's say, was Tron a good movie? Okay, not everyone might have seen Tron. It's going to be something like even more basic, like um, breakfast versus brunch. Who knows? Something like this. And then it's going to ask if you agree or disagree. And I'm going to say something really important that applies to all of speaking. It's that signpost. So, you do not want to be talking in a jumbled manner. All right, you need to just be talking in simple, very easy to understand sentences. You don't need to be fancy. The TOEFL graders want to give you points, and you just rack up points from signposting. So you go like, okay, so firstly, secondly, or according to this, or in my opinion, you gotta just have these little introductory signposting sort of phrases or sentences thrown in so that your ideas are very clear to understand. And again, your ideas don't need to be very complex or anything. It's just this is testing your speaking skills, and it wants to see how concisely you can speak about something, and that's it. And so other things, you will be reading a short text along with listening to a conversation that relates to the short text, and then you summarize what happened. And again, just signpost. So, introduce like, okay, so University A is trying to abolish skateboarding. they provided this reasons. However, student X disagreed with each of these notions because they thought this, and then this is that, and you just link these ideas together. There, you're done speaking. And most importantly, try not to panic. All right, not panic. Good. Okay. If you panic, then you won't have enough time. Then like the timer does not stop. It just the question gets introduced. You have 20 seconds to think about it, and then 45 to 60 seconds to give your answer. Do not panic. And then finally, you will listen to a very short lecture, and again, you just paraphrase what happened. That's it. Speaking section, very dreaded, but I'm sure all of you guys can handle it. So, next part that we have to deal with is going to be the next most dreaded thing, the writing section. Now, not everyone's a competent writer, but thankfully, you don't need to be a competent writer for the TOEFL. You just need to be good enough, and that's what makes it so much more manageable. So, it's going to be asking you to write two different essays every time. You will be having to write about, you will essentially write, what do you call it, a synthesis essay, where you incorporate some sort of text source into a written paraphrased form. Actually, no, no. You're given one text and one lecture to listen to, and then you synthesize these together into like this essay that summarizes the main points. And now the question will differ. Sometimes it'll just ask, oh, what do these two sources think about this subject? Or it could ask something more like, how did the lecturer respond to the text's claims? And it might come up with something like that, and all you have to do is again keep everything super simple, so write in simple sentences. Now, to a certain degree, the grading rubric will look for complexity, right? It's going to look for clever use of diction, it's going to look for clever use of your sentence structures, it's going to look at how effectively you describe the idea within that recommended uh 200 to 220 word range. And so for some this might seem like a lot. For me it felt really constricting, and so I'd recommend just writing everything out at once, right? Writing out all your ideas, and you just combine the two sources into just this one mega long jumbled text, and then you organize it afterward, and then you just start editing. So you look through and you're like, oh my god, I'm missing a counter argument. Oh yeah, the TOEFL graders love a quick, nice and juicy counter argument thrown in once or twice. One or two counter arguments, and then that's like half your complexity taken care of, and then you edit in a way where it's just intuitive with the way you use the few number of words you have to combine the main ideas covered in the given sources. Pretty straightforward. It's just writing a synthesis essay. You can practice these whenever you want. And finally, opinion essay. I don't really have anything to say here. It's an opinion essay. There's this claim that you're gonna be given a choice of a claim, and it's gonna be like red or blue. Which color is less racist? Okay, this is kind of hard to answer, but the idea is it's gonna be giving something simpler like, is it better to jog in the morning or the evening? Well, a little more complex than that, but the idea is you gotta write an opinion essay, and that's it. That's how you give the TOEFL, guys. And I made one mistake in each section. I basically have a pretty good idea of where I fucked up, but don't stress too much. Do not stress too much over getting a perfect score. As long as you have like 110 plus, you can. It's enough for any very competent school. If you have 100 plus, then that's gonna be enough for most things, or even just 90 plus is fine. So don't kill yourself over the TOEFL. It's just English proficiency. And some say that the IELTS is easier. I don't know. Haven't given it, so you guys can decide what you want. And thank you for watching the video.